We're right in the middle of this massive global explosion of African creativity. It's literally everywhere. But in this explainer, we're going to dig into the actual structural blueprint of who is truly building wealth from all this. Because sure, the culture is everywhere, music, film, fashion. But if we want to understand the real mechanics of wealth creation, we have to look past just the entertainment value. We've got to look right at the financial plumbing. So let's just dive straight into it. So African creators are taking over the globe, right? But the elephant in the room is who is actually getting wealthy? We're seeing all these incredibly talented Black African creators pumping out massive global hits across literally every medium. I mean, they are driving the global cultural zeitgeist. But as we navigate this explainer, the one crucial question we have to keep coming back to is who actually owns the underlying intellectual property? Because look, creating a hit song or movie is one thing, but owning the asset that's going to keep paying out for the next 50 years, that is something entirely different. To really wrap our heads around the scale of this problem and honestly the extraordinary opportunity here, let's picture a scenario. Imagine an exceptionally talented Black animator who dreams up this phenomenal, culturally rich new superhero character. Picture a powerful Black hero, right? Deeply rooted in African mythology, visually absolutely stunning, and with undeniable global appeal. You look at it and you just know this character is an absolute goldmine. But here's the catch. Our animator completely locks the capital, they don't have the legal team, and they don't have the commercial infrastructure to finance a full series. They've got the creative genius, for sure, but the financial machinery, it's just not there. And this right here is where the structural tragedy happens. Because our animator needs to, pay rent, and they desperately want to see their Black superhero on screen. So out of sheer necessity, they end up selling the rights way too early. They get this small, one-time cash payment, just a basic production fee. But the traditional investor, man, they walk away with decades of generational wealth. That investor now completely owns the sequels, they own the remake rights, they own the action figures, the clothing lines, the international streaming rights, the whole shebang. The creator got a quick paycheck, while the investor just bought an empire. Now, this severe imbalance isn't just happening to our animator. It is a massive structural crisis across a completely fragmented landscape. We're talking about Nollywood films, massive Afrobeats music catalogs, fashion brands, literary works, digital media, you name it. Across all these sectors, extraordinary value is being created by African talent every single day. But it's poorly documented, it's totally fragmented, and ultimately, that long-term wealth is almost always captured by someone else. So how do we actually fix this? Well, the ultimate solution to this massive wealth drain is what we call a Creative Equity Syndicate. Let's break this down into super simple terms so anyone can grasp it. A syndicate is really just a highly effective mechanism that pools organized capital from multiple investors. So instead of our animator having to beg one major studio for money and basically giving up all their rights on day one, 10 different investors pool their money together. They properly finance our animator to build out that entire Black superhero universe, and the creator actually gets to keep their leverage. Now, as you get into syndicates, you're going to hear this financial jargon a lot. Deal-by-deal SPVs or special purpose vehicles. Don't let the terminology intimidate you. If we translate that into plain English, an SPV is literally just a legally protected, safe basket. Think of it like a physical lockbox. We take the specific intellectual property rights to our animator's Black superhero, and we carefully place them right inside this lockbox. It sits completely separate from the animator's personal bank account and entirely separate from any other projects the syndicate happens to be funding. To make this work flawlessly, instead of throwing all the cash into one big, messy company, we build a smart, layered structure. Step 1 is setting up a parent Creative HoldCo. That's the parent company that owns the brand and the tech. Then, Step 2 moves down to an investment management firm. These are the brains of the operation, handling all the due diligence and talking to the investors. And then, Step 3 is where we actually create those individual SVP safe baskets we just talked about, custom-built for each specific project. But wait, the genius really doesn't stop there. The remaining layers are built for one thing: serious, long-term wealth generation. Step 4 is a dedicated IP company whose sole job is to hold the actual trademarks for a Black superhero. Step 5 is a commercialization arm. These are the heavy hitters who negotiate international licensing and push merchandise globally. And finally, Step 6 is a valuation institute. This is crucial. They meticulously research the true data-backed value of African IP, so our creators finally know exactly what their art is worth. So why do all this? The absolutely crucial point here is how this protects everyone's money. This layered approach beautifully ring-fences risk. Let's say the syndicate invests in a Nollywood film over an SPV 001, and, sadly the movie flops and loses money. Because of this exact structure, that failure absolutely does not contaminate the profits sitting safely over an SPV 003, which is holding our incredibly successful Black superhero animation. The risk is totally isolated. The winners can just run free. Once you get this properly structured, it's amazing how dynamic the revenue flywheel becomes. Our animator's single-hit asset doesn't just make money from people watching the cartoon on TV. It generates this complex, beautiful mix of recurring revenue. You've got royalties, maybe 35% coming from IP licensing, like letting a major video game studio use the character, another 15% from merchandising, like action figures and backpacks, plus your standard management fees. The IP literally transforms into a living, breathing cash machine. Which brings us straight to the core philosophy here. Create once, monetize globally. Just think about the sheer scalability of this. Once our beautifully designed Black superhero character is created and drawn, you don't have to redraw it every single time you want to sell a toy. The syndicate can license that exact same character design onto t-shirts and logos, backpacks in London, and comic books in Tokyo, all with extraordinarily high profit margins. You do the heavy lifting once, and it pays out everywhere. But, and listen, this is a major but, before a syndicate can deploy a single naira, cedi, or dollar from diaspora investors or family offices, they absolutely must investigate the chain of title. They have to fiercely answer one core question: who actually owns this IP and for exactly how long? Because if our animator accidentally signed away even a tiny piece of their superhero to some former business partner 5 years ago, that whole multi-million-dollar deal could collapse overnight. Because let's be real, capital risk is exceptionally high in these creative ventures. The syndicate has to rely on really strict governance and independent committees to navigate some serious roadblocks. We are talking about messy IP ownership, unauthorized licensing, copyright infringements, and the wildly complex reality of Pan-African currency fluctuations. You can't just wing this. It requires rigorous, professional management to keep those investments safe and actually growing. But man, when it is executed correctly, a staggering network effect takes over. When you properly empower Black creators, it naturally attracts deeper investor capital. That deeper capital funds way higher quality projects. And what does that do? It brings the global streaming platforms right to the table. Once those massive distributors arrive, the heavy-hitting global brand partnerships come knocking right at their door. It just creates this unstoppable flywheel of growth for everyone involved. And this vision, it completely refuses to be contained by borders. African creativity is a continent-wide force, and this structure scales so brilliantly into a massive Pan-African platform. Picture this: a West Africa Creative Fund and an East Africa Creative Fund existing at the exact same time. They're out there developing their own local talent, but they share the exact same elite legal, technological, and commercialization infrastructure from the parent company. The efficiency is just off the charts. Ultimately, why go through all this effort? For the exits. For the investors and the creators alike, this structure finally unlocks the absolute holy grail of financial returns. This is how you actually build generational wealth. We're talking about recurring, long-term dividends that pay out for decades. We're looking at highly lucrative private equity buyouts, strategic acquisitions by global media conglomerates, or, hey, even the possibility of listing these mature IP assets publicly on a stock exchange. Honestly, if you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer, I want you to remember this core philosophy right here. We must transition African art, African stories, and African characters from being things that the world merely consumes into assets that are systematically and permanently owned, financed, licensed, and invested in by the very people who built them. That is the game changer. The global market is absolutely scrambling for African intellectual property right now. The structural blueprint for generational wealth, the exact mechanics needed to protect brilliant creations like our Black superhero, it's sitting right in front of us. So the only question left for you is, what role are you going to play in owning the future? Whether you're a creator, an investor, or an operator, how will you ensure this creative gold rush actually empowers the people making the art? We are on the ground floor of an entirely new creative economy. If this explainer sparked your curiosity and you want to understand exactly how to position yourself in this space, reach out. Let's start building and let's own the future together.